a sagittal section. There's still some of the dura mater in there. That's like the actual crossing of the superior sagittal sinus and the transverse sinus, the falx cerebri and the tentorium cerebellar right there. That's that central portion. So what we want to do is preferably, you can see this darkened area of brain there. That looks like that tissue was damaged there, probably before death. Right? There was either some bleeding there, or that could be blood supply was cut off to that area. Anyway, we want to cut as much as we can with a single slice, so we're not, cutting it like a piece of steak there and cutting on multiple planes. You want to cut it through on one plane if you can, especially right through the center of the cerebrum right here. Towards the front, I don't worry about too much, and the cerebellum is not that big a deal either. We'll be able to see what we need to see. So what I want to do is I'm separating it a little bit, and right about here I'm just going to sort of press down a little bit of an angle and cut through this way. Okay, and I'm just sort of pulling it forward, staying right in the longitudinal fissure there as one slice. Okay, now we can separate it a little bit, and I'll press down through the center, all the way down. I press firmly down to the bottom of the blue stuff there. And then for the cerebellum, I just kind of squeeze it here. I'm going to try to go right through the center of the vermis, the central portion. And again, it's not as necessary to be as careful for this part. And then I try to cut, I'll just slide it right through the center of the brainstem there. And then I should have separation, a little bit of a spot right there. I'll just try to stay in the same plane all the way down. Okay. So what we're looking at here is a nice sagittal section and a couple of landmarks, and then I'll let you go ahead and look at this. You see the first thing, oh, and can someone just bring me a model of the human brain? Just one of them that's right there. Yeah, half of it's fine, even if it's one half, that's perfect. Okay. So we're going to try to identify it on both. And the first thing you see when you open the human brain, it's a little bigger, is this sort of ear-looking thing right here. Kind of looks like a Nike swoosh there. Okay. And that is the corpus callosum. Okay, and you can see it here. Okay, this little swoosh. It's wider than the tissue around it. It's all white matter in there, but these are actually tracts that are going, they're commissural tracts. Do you remember what commissural tracts are?
They went across?
They go across from right to left. So these are the tracks that are going from right to left hemisphere. It looks like a little ear there. These are capillaries that are right around that. And then they're coming out of this space in here. I'll show you. Let me just get rid of some of these just so they're not in my way. This bottom portion here of this little formation here, which you'd see right here, is called the fornix. Okay? So there's actually a space in between the two. And sometimes there's a little membrane there. You see that membrane I'm under? Mm-hmm. That is called the septum pellucidum. And I'm going between the fornix down here and the corpus callosum above it. They're both commissural tracts. And if I open it up and I look in there, inside this space, that is the lateral ventricle. Remember the ventricles? Mm-hmm. So it's all the way deep inside the hemisphere, the lateral ventricle. And if I look in there, I can sometimes dig out some capillaries. These don't seem to want to come out, but they're there. There they are. Okay, some capillaries in there. Does anyone remember what the capillaries are called inside the ventricles? Choroid plexus. That's where CSF comes from the blood in there, and the blood CSF area. The little springy capillaries in there. And this little septum that I'm kind of breaking a little bit here, that's the septum pellucidum between the two. And the the choroid plexus inside the lateral ventricle there. And I would see the same thing on the other side, except usually that septum pellucidum is so thin it usually goes to one side or the other. You're not going to see it on both sides generally. But there's the separation between the corpus callosum above, fornix below, lateral ventricle in there. There's a choroid plexus if I were to peel that out a little bit. There it is. Okay, tuck it back in. Okay. And then some other features you'll see. A lot of people ask me, so I'm just going to tell you. The third ventricle is located right in the middle. It's very, very thin. It's an extremely, almost like paper thin little space. This is the thalamus. You see this round area right here? That is the thalamus. And here is the hypothalamus just below it. This is the optic chiasm, remember, from where these cross. There's where the infundibulum will be for the pituitary. And you can see a little part of the mammillary body would be right here. So that's it. That's the hypothalamus, just there below the thalamus. And the third ventricle is basically just in space, like right here between the two sides, pancake between the two. Very, very thin, extremely thin. You could see it on here. Here would be where the lateral ventricle is, back behind the septum pellucidum here. So in there, you know, this space, if I were to take this out, let's just remove this. You would have this. You'd see the septum still there, but that's the lateral ventricle where it's located inside the hemisphere. It would be inside here. They're just doing this so they could show the insula. Now, if I were to do this, then you can see the thalamus is this area right here. This little button connects the two sides, but we don't really see it in the sheep. It's called the what do we call that again? Intermediate mass of the thalamus. This little area, this little sort of W-shaped little area right here, where the optic chiasm, mammillary body, and fundibulum would be right here. That's the hypothalamus, this little spot. Okay. Just down here, this little spot down here. There's the thalamus above it. This little indented area by the thalamus and hypothalamus, the diencephalon, that's the third ventricle. It's that thin, just that space, and the one from the other side fitting together. You get this thin little space in the middle there. So you don't really see the third ventricle so good. It's not like I could just point right there and say, what's that? Oh, third ventricle. I would have to ask, what ventricle is located right here? Third, right. And then you can even see this space also is part of the third ventricle. There's some capillaries in there. There's choroid plexus of the third ventricle. Okay? Tuck it back in there. But it's all throughout here, just on top of this surface. Then it would flow down through here. You can kind of see where it would flow. Sometimes you could see it better than, let's see. Okay. It would flow down in this direction. It comes down through what we call the midbrain right here, and it comes through a cerebral aqueduct. For some reason it's not showing up as well in here. Sometimes you can see a little indentation. I made a little bit of a bad cut. And it comes down, and then if you follow it down here, there's a space into the cerebellum. You can see where you can come in here a little bit. That's the fourth ventricle, right in here. Okay, we come down the cerebral aqueduct through the midbrain, and there's a little space there called the fourth ventricle between where the cerebellum would be and the pons, the back of the pons here. Fourth ventricle. Okay, then it continues down from there into this little groove right here. See that? Mm-hmm. That's the central canal, the spinal cord, all the way down. Central canal. Cerebral aqueduct's a little hard to see on these. That's the pathway of CSF. Okay, so go ahead, make the cut. Try to identify all the structures on your list. You guys can take this one.